Hello, I'm Nick Offerman, white male translator for Gaslit Nation. To sum up this week's episode, kleptocracy anywhere is kleptocracy everywhere, and this is a transnational crime syndicate masquerading as a government. Thanks for listening.
I'm Sarah KENDZIOR. I'm a journalist, a scholar of authoritarian states, focusing on the former Soviet Union, the author of the book The View from Flyover Country, and the upcoming book Hiding in Plain Sight.
I'm ANDREA CHALUPA, a writer and the screenwriter and producer of the upcoming journalistic thriller, Mr. Jones.
And this is Gaslit Nation, a podcast covering corruption in the Trump administration and the rise of autocracy around the world.
Today, we have a very special episode where we walk you through how to write a horror screenplay. It's very simple. All you have to do is show these little ominous signs of danger, just little tidbits of danger, sort of like when you watch Rosemary's Baby and you have like that creepy older couple that seems really nice, but something's off. That's called foreshadowing. So right now we're living in an age where you could easily identify with what it's like to live in a horror film, because all of us are living in a horror film filled with foreshadowing. And that is, of course, the climate crisis. If you see these monster storms that we have, these fires in California, the climate refugees that you're seeing as a result of these storms and fires, like in Puerto Rico, as one big catastrophic example, this is all foreshadowing, because guess what? It's going to get exponentially worse, according to all the experts who have been trying to warn us, especially for decades. This is screenwriting 101 for horror films, foreshadowing, followed by the act 3 of the devil being unleashed and total absolute chaos. Because what we're looking at is if we don't listen to all the reports telling us that we have to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which means we need to cut carbon pollution by 45% by the year 2030 and down to 0 by 2050. If nations, if communities across the country, if counties, if mayors, if governors, if candidates for political office, if all of us don't make this first and foremost in our minds, in the work we do, then it's over for humanity. Nature will just be fine. The planet will be fine, but the species will get wiped out. And if you're okay with that, understand that that's apathy, and apathy is another form of evil. And it's not up to you to sentence me to death or Sarah to death or Greta Thunberg or anyone's child to death. And you'll be doing that if you choose to take the road of apathy and despair. So instead, all of us need to fight like we fought, like a generation fought the Nazis during World War II. We all need to stand up to this threat. It's an existential threat. And what we're looking at is not only an incalculable cost. You could say, sure, several billions, but it could be trillions of costs, but also the worst refugee crisis that human history has ever seen. You're going to see massive amounts of displaced peoples because of rising sea levels and all like a whole catastrophe of conditions that come out of the climate crisis. So I cannot stress enough that this episode today, where we speak with a superhero who's working on the front lines of the climate crisis, Daniel Zarrilli, the chief climate policy advisor to New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio. He is going to walk us through his work, working with mayors around the world to try to counteract the destructive agendas of governments like the Trump administration and so forth, and what they are doing, what progress they are making in confronting the climate crisis and getting some results that can save humanity. Because the reality is we are too late. And a lot of the work that Daniel Zarrilli is doing is helping New York brace for impact, because the big monster is coming. We're too late to stop the monster. So really the work we all need to do as a species right now is to shrink the size of the monster, make the monster more manageable to handle, because the monster is coming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we should say we're taping this on June 9th. You will know by the time this episode airs why we taped so many episodes in advance. But currently in my state, in Missouri, we're having record flooding. And that's true in Illinois and Arkansas and Oklahoma and all of these, states in the center of the country. And it's wiped out crops. It's wiped out homes. It's displaced families. And so, this is a nonpartisan crisis. This is not just a matter of, the coastal cities will plummet into the sea. There is no region that's going to be spared this. There is no region that's going to be spared all the social and political effects of this, including, as Andrea was just saying, a forthcoming refugee crisis, which is, probably going to be unparalleled to anything that we've seen in history. And, what we need to do is to be upfront about it, is to educate people about it. One of the depressing things from this week was the refusal of the DNC to hold a climate change themed debate. And I hope by the time this episode airs, maybe they will have changed their mind on that, because every important social and political issue is connected to climate change. The economy, immigration, healthcare, all these things that the Democrats say that they want to stress, and that of course they should be stressing. You cannot extract them from climate change. And you also cannot extract the rise of autocracy worldwide from climate change and from reallocation of resources and from resource hoarding by autocratic regimes. They are going to exacerbate this crisis, and they are going to exploit this crisis. And so, on Gaslit Nation, we're known as a show that talks primarily about dictatorship, but we need to look at environmental catastrophe as linked to that, particularly as the crisis worsens. And so we're going to continue doing that throughout the year. And, this is our first episode, I think, solely focused on this issue, but, it's not going to be our last.
Absolutely. And Gaslit Nation declares the 2020 election the election of the climate crisis.
Indeed.
If you are a candidate running for any office anywhere in the United States, the climate crisis has to be a key part of your platform, or else you're giving yourself away that you don't believe in facts, you don't believe in science, and you do not believe in moral courage, and you rather further mass murder of species.
Yeah, you're saying you don't believe in us. You don't believe in our children. You don't believe in our children's children. You don't believe in our future. And we want to vote for candidates, and we want to support people, who do, and who are willing to fight, and who are willing to come up with, comprehensive plans and solutions. We're not going to take no for an answer on this.
Yes, and we have great ways to get involved with Dan's work, which we're going to link to in the show notes of this episode, as well as in our action guide, which you can find on gaslitnationpod.com. Again, none of us can afford the luxury of despair. You can feel frustrated, but channel that frustration in doing the essential work to literally save the species and save all the animals out there as well. We need to stop losing endangered species, and we need to just use our very large, sophisticated brains as humans. We do have them, and they're an untapped resource, and we can turn this around instead of living out an actual horror film.
So I'm very excited. I'm starstruck more than usual today in this interview because I'm talking to a real-life superhero, Daniel Zarrilli, who is the climate czar for New York City. And this is a very huge opportunity for all of us to understand the nuts and bolts and really where we are right now, what to do about it, about the climate crisis, but also Daniel's work, his story is an example of the importance of cities across the nation, around the world, and American states right now to counteract the deliberately toxic agenda coming out of the Trump White House. So this is a story of hope. It's probably going to break you down and terrify you before it gets better, but we're going to be in this together. And so I'm honored and I'm so privileged and thrilled to have some of your time, given how the fate of our planet rests in part in the work that you do, Dan.
Thanks. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I think it's such an important topic to be thinking about and bringing to as many audiences as possible. And the risks of global warming are going to affect everybody, and so it's really important that we're talking about this.
Just in terms of language, global warming, could we call it climate crisis now?
I think they're all good in lots of different ways. It is the burning of fossil fuels that is causing global warming, that is ultimately leading to climate change. And really, the evolution of language that people are really going through right now, talking about it as an emergency, as a crisis, as a climate breakdown, I think is evocative and helps people understand what we're talking about, because this isn't just some, natural cycle that's going up and down. This is literally because of the actions of humans on this planet, and in many cases, the actions of a very small number of fossil fuel companies that are causing this climate crisis that we're all facing right now.
The fossil fuel companies, the big oil companies that the city itself that you were part of tried to sue.
We are actively suing. We are still in court. We'll be in front of the appellate court sometime later this year. We are actively looking to protect New Yorkers from the risks that we're facing, and that means going after the cause of this crisis that we face. And we know that the burning of fossil fuels has caused this. The big oil companies went through a decades-long campaign of deception and denial to hide that fact and continue to push the expansion of fossil fuels into our economy. And we are now stuck with the impacts. Seas are rising. It's getting hotter. That's going to cause all sorts of instability, like food insecurity, conflict, migration, and any number of other social changes that are going to be coming from this.
And when we're, of course, long past already seeing it, the hurricanes are becoming even more monstrous, the fires, all of it.
That's right. I think it's Al Gore that talks about the nightly news being like a daily walk through the book of Revelation. It's evocative to think about all these different impacts, and whether it's, yes, we saw Hurricane Sandy here in New York City, and that killed 44 New Yorkers, $19 billion in damages. It was the worst natural disaster that ever hit here. But we've seen it in the wildfires in California. We've seen it with the intense rain from Hurricane Harvey in Houston. We saw the devastation in Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria. All of this, and that's just in the United States, and the impacts in Mozambique. And we've seen impacts all over the place recently. Japanese heat waves, everything that is just showing that there is no more normal. And it's not even a new normal that we're in. We're in a constantly changing climate that's going to continue to threaten everything. And that is, we've never lived through a time like this where carbon dioxide is at these levels where they are now. The last time they were at these levels, there weren't humans. So we don't know what this looks like. We're all heading into uncharted territory here.
Today we're talking about forhers.com, a new women's wellness brand putting your body back in your control. Getting birth control is a hassle. The time it takes to go to your doctor's office, the stress of receiving your new pack on time, or the phone calls you have to make to find out why your insurance is no longer paying for it is absurd. Your birth control should be delivered to you when you need it, where you need it, without judgment, and with your physician available to answer questions you might have. You're not alone. More than 10 million women in the U.S. take the pill, and the struggle to receive it is real. ForHers.com is helping women across the country get convenient and affordable access to birth control. They access licensed doctors online who can evaluate you, and if appropriate, prescribe you birth control that can be delivered direct to your door. Listeners can get their first month of birth control from forhers.com for just $5 right now while supplies last and subject to doctor approval. See website for full details. Go to forhers.com/gaslit. That's forhers.com/gaslit. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and safety information. Today we're talking about Third Love, a great company that makes bra shopping super easy. We at Gaslit Nation know it's a pain to take time out of the fight against fascism to go shopping for bras. Thanks to Third Love, you can get it done online fast and take a stand against autocracy in style. Using Third Love's online Fit Finder quiz, you can order your bras and try them on at home. Third Love uses data points generated by millions of women who've taken their Fit Finder quiz to design bras for a perfect fit and premium feel. Over 12 million women have taken the quiz to date. Third Love offers a 100% fit guarantee and over 70 sizes. Every customer has 60 days to wear it, wash it, and put it to the test. If you don't love it, you can return it, and Third Love will wash it and donate it to a woman in need. Third Love's team of expert fit stylists are available every day to help via text, chat, or phone. Returns and exchanges are free and easy. Third Love knows there's a perfect bra for everyone, so right now they're offering our listeners 15% off your first order. Go to thirdlove.com/gaslit now to find your perfect fitting bra and get 15% off your first purchase. That's thirdlove.com/gaslit for 15% off today.
When I was studying screenwriting, I read Beasts of the Southern Wild, which is a stunning film about, of course, Hurricane Katrina, the aftermath and the floods. And it took on this biblical proportion. And then right after finishing reading that script, my husband and I took like an anniversary boat ride with a bunch of tourists in New York Harbor, a sailboat. And the sailor, the captain of the sailboat said, I've been sailing for over 30 years. The currents are changing, and I've never in my life seen them change this way. And it was just this horrible, it was not a relaxing boat ride, to say the least. It was ominous. And so it's all around us. It's in our face. It's like Mother Nature's like grabbing us by the collar and just saying enough already.
That's right. And it's too much of this, the conversation on climate sort of devolves into whether it's a partisan issue or not, or whether it's, you believe or you don't believe. And let's just be clear that the science is incontrovertible. The climate is changing. It's coming from fossil fuels. What we keep seeing out of the climate panels, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change out of the UN, recently put out a report on what it will take in order to head off some of the worst catastrophe and actually limit ourselves to 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And it's a really dramatic drop in fossil fuel use that has to happen now. The National Climate Assessment, which the Trump administration tried to put out on Black Friday, tried to bury it on Black Friday. Well, that failed. It actually got probably more attention than it even would have gotten because they were trying to hide it. And the New York City Panel on Climate Change, which came out in March of this year, all telling a similar story at the global, at the national, at the local level, that we have changed our world, and it's leading to rising seas, it's leading to more heat, it's leading to more rain, and all of this is just pure science at this point, and it's not really up for debate. What's really, I think, up for debate is what are we doing about it, and are we doing enough?
And we'll get into that, but I want to first talk about how to reach over to the other side of the aisle and help wake people up. And a lot of that is the economy's stupid, hitting them in their wallet. Could you talk about the economic impact if we don't do anything about the climate crisis?
Yeah, let me just give you an example here from New York from 2012 when Hurricane Sandy hit. Again, it was a $19 billion event in damages and lost economic activity. Well, we did some simple modeling that didn't change anything about the city, didn't change anything about anything but the climate. We were able to do some modeling that showed a Sandy-like event that hit in the 2050s would be a $90 billion event, just from the greater damage that we would see without even escalating the dollars into future dollars or anything like that. And so it goes to show you that we've hit a tipping point and we're at a really pivotal moment where we are locking in changes. And if we don't change our behavior, we're going to see that across the entire economy.
Me as a voter, let's say in Ohio, like everyone wants Ohio in the presidential election, as a coveted Ohio vote, how would you convince me? Let's say I'm one of those independent voters. How would you convince me in terms of, sitting around my kitchen table of why I should care about this?
Well, I'm not necessarily going to pretend to be the political strategist for Ohio. It's a little out of my lane, but I think you're just thinking about the impacts that your kids are going to see, the changes that we've locked in, the world that they're going to inherit. Step back and think about what that means to you, and what you're willing to do or how you're willing to change in order to make sure that you're securing a more livable future for the next generation, for your grandkids. I think that's pretty compelling, and many of the climate stories I think that are most compelling to people are really when they become personal. It's not as much what's the parts per million of carbon dioxide or how many feet of sea level rise are we going to see or the dollar impacts across the entire economy. Although I just went through all those. What's more compelling is, continuing to burn fossil fuels means your kid is more likely to have asthma. It also means that maybe your house is more likely to flood. It's the things that actually hit you in your day-to-day that are, when you start to understand those things, it makes you start to think about what you're willing to do differently.
Climate scientists have been saying no solution is too bold right now. You're linked in with the big global network, cities across the U.S. as well, and states. You're with the people that have the solutions or are working towards solutions. In your opinion, given the landscape, the view that you have, are we being bold enough? Can we be bolder?
Well, I think we all need to be bolder, for sure. We have set some really aggressive targets here in New York City. The Globe has set some aggressive targets through the Paris Agreement, and needs to deliver on the commitments from each of the nations in order to achieve those. But limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is no sure thing at this point, and yet it's still locking in certain changes. It's locking in certain biodiversity loss. It's locking in levels of sea level rise that will be disruptive in their own right, and yet we can't let it go any further. And we're on a trajectory where we're actually heading towards someplace much worse if we don't change our behavior.
From what I've read in interviews you've given, so we're already on the path to destruction, like it's coming. But now so the work you're doing is trying to limit that destruction, like stem it off, almost like in triage.
We approach things here in New York City on three different ideas. One is that we have locked in a certain amount of change, and so we do need to adapt, and we need to think about our coastal communities, and we need to think about heat mitigation and those sort of things. But that's not enough. We actually have to get to the root cause, and for us, that means leading by example, cutting our own greenhouse gas emissions. We're on track to get to a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, to get to net zero by 2050. That is what the science demands if we're going to be on this trajectory to get to 1.5 degrees as a cap. And that's no easy task. But we're retrofitting our buildings. We just passed the biggest action of any city or anyone in the world, really, with our building retrofit mandates. That just passed last month in the city council. We are greening our own fleet. We are expanding to mandatory organics composting here in New York City. All the sources of greenhouse gases we're trying to attack, and we're leading by example first, and then trying to bring that out to the wider city and set a message for the entire globe and really tell that story. And then the last piece, beyond getting to our own greenhouse gas emissions, is the work we're doing to hold fossil fuel companies accountable. Through our lawsuit, we're divesting our pension funds from fossil fuels. We're doubling our investments into climate solutions so that we can help spur the transition to a more renewable future.
President Trump comes to power and scraps the Paris Agreement. The U.S. just turned its back on it. Could you walk us through what the Paris Agreement is, which other countries are not part of it? I believe it's like Syria and Venezuela, right? Or sort of the other two, I think.
I think they're all in now.
Oh, they're all in. And so the U.S. is the only one. The United States of America is the only one that's not. Okay. Well,
we are still party to the Paris Agreement. He announced his intention to withdraw. It takes a several-year process to actually withdraw, and I believe the date to formally pull out is it's a few days before or a few days after the November elections in 2020. So, the elections go a different way. I think the next president would get right back in. The Paris Agreement itself is a non-binding agreement. It's a collaboration among nations, and with a set of targets. 2 degrees, stretching for 1.5 degrees as our targets for what we can limit the warming to. And each nation has to step up and every 5 years, hopefully increase their ambition to get themselves onto that target. And so each nation has put together their nationally defined contribution. None of those, when you add them all up, are sufficient. And so, but the mechanism in the Paris Agreement is that every 5 years, and the next, that fifth year is 2020, nations will be coming back to hopefully ratchet up their commitments and continue to put themselves on that better path.
When you, as a city, your work, you said New York City is going to do the Paris Agreement. That's what I remember.
So the day after President Trump announced his intention to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, Mayor de Blasio literally the next day, signed an executive order committing New York City to the goals and principles of the Paris Agreement, directed our agencies to come together with a plan to achieve it. And 90 days later, we released what was the world's first city Paris Agreement compliant plan, which is what we call our 1.5 plan. And we put additional emphasis in getting those building retrofits done. We've accelerated the work to expand charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, and we're doing a whole bunch of other things to make sure that we are leading by example and really using the fact that New York City, and it's a bit of a privileged place as the media capital, the cultural capital, the financial capital of the world, to send a message to the globe.
That's right, Los Angeles, cultural capital. You heard it here. So could you walk us through your work in linking up with all of these other cities and states and sort of the resistance to the toxic Trump agenda?
What was amazing was in the days after the president withdrew from the Paris Agreement and we signed our executive order committing ourselves to it, several weeks later, maybe that number had gotten up to about 400 cities, 400 mayors that have stood up and said, no, we're still in. We are still part of the Paris Agreement. Doesn't really matter what happens in the White House. We're still in. And the actual campaign of We Are Still In grew out of that. America's pledge grew out of that, when you add up all the commitments that different cities and states and universities and businesses are putting together, we can nearly fill the American pledge to the Paris Agreement just with those actions. And so we're all trying to continue to do more, but it shows you the power of other levels of government, of businesses, of universities, and others. We all need to play a role in this to begin with. And if I could even say the silver lining is that, before that action happened with the president pulling out, that a lot of people thought that, the federal government has this under control and has it handled. And, the silver lining is that it actually did show that we need to do more. We need to come together at different levels of government and as cities and others to really be even more a part of this effort going forward.
Outside of New York City, which cities across the country do you feel like are really leading on this issue?
There's a lot of cities, and so we participate in a number of different networks, and whether it's the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, Climate Mayors, and others, the big cities, Chicago and LA, and of course there's Atlanta and Pittsburgh and Seattle and San Francisco. I can keep going. There are cities all over the country that are stepping up and continuing to demonstrate that they can take action. They are expanding their renewable power. They're expanding electric vehicles. They're doing work to upgrade their building codes, and they're continuing to really help get the nation on track with the Paris Agreement.
In terms of the individual and our responsibility, obviously, you could recycle, you can compost, you can do like a carbon audit of your home and your building and all of it. Could you talk a little bit about sort of how the individual can get involved in the work that you're doing and sort of, because there is sort of a tension. I think some people feel, sure, I can do all that, but it's a tiny drop in an ocean, and that the change has to come from an overhaul of our systems. And you need all this government leadership in order to do that and reforms. And so there is that tension there between what can I do? I'm so outnumbered versus needing that leadership from the top. So can you talk about a bit of that tension? And then also, what can I do as an individual? Our listeners, what can they do starting today? Where could they sign up? Or what are some steps they could take?
There really is a debate that goes on in the climate community over is it personal behavior change that we need to really solve this, or is it systemic change that we need? And the clear answer, obviously, is that we need both. And I think that the more people are willing to take personal behavior change, like to think about their own behaviors and to make changes in their own lives, I think that builds the support for the systemic change. But that doesn't let off the hook policymakers and elected officials and others that need to do the hard work of changing the way our energy grid works, or looking at how transportation and buildings are built and used across the nation. There are clearly big solutions that can only happen at the state level or at the national level, and in some cases the city level. But I really do think that it's people getting involved and seeing their own part and being willing to make a change that helps build the support for those bigger changes that need to happen systemically.
I've seen over the years veganism, for instance, being this fringe thing, and now it's a mainstream movement. You have all of these wonderful vegan chain restaurants. And I've been traveling to Eastern Europe for over a decade now, and I can tell you, Warsaw, Poland has some of the best vegan restaurants in the world. And Eastern Europe is known for like meat and potatoes like every meal. And here you have probably like the number one restaurant in all of Warsaw is a vegan sushi restaurant. And it's delicious. And I've seen that. We've all seen the evolution of the more people choose giving up meat. And like you said, the systems change. So we do make a difference based on the choices we as individuals make.
That's absolutely right. And it's also, it doesn't necessarily have to be all or nothing. In New York City, we have a Meatless Mondays program in our schools and hospitals. And it doesn't mean that you need to totally cut things out of your life 100%. But every little bit of warming matters. And therefore, every bit of, whether it's beef consumption or whether it's your fossil fuel use, that matters too. And doing things less can add up, even if it doesn't feel like it, or if it's a drop in the bucket. If other people are doing that, that has larger, you add it up and it has a big impact.
Are there specific initiatives that you guys are doing, that your network of colleagues are doing, that individuals can sign up to help with?
Yeah, we have a great program called Green YC. It has social media handles and it has a website and people can take a pledge. And in some cases, it's bring your own. It's the Bring It campaign. Bring your own bottle. Bring your own coffee mug. Instead of using single-use plastics and throwing away plastic bottles and those sort of things, better just to have a reusable cup and container. And you can actually sign a pledge and you can do that in your own life. We have all sorts of training on organics composting that our sanitation department does for anyone who has access to a side yard or something where they can do composting. New York City alone, I think, is just by living in New York City, we have a third of the per capita emissions of anywhere else in the country just because of the density of where we live and the fact that we have a mass transit system. Even if we complain about it a lot, it still means that we're able to use a train instead of driving everywhere that we go, like a lot of other cities. And so part of it is being in New York City is a great answer to that, but also there are more things you can do to eliminate single-use plastics that are based on petroleum. You can compost, and we have a whole bunch of other things that you can sign up for through that Green YC program.
I hate plastic. We're also dependent on it. Are there any solutions that have crossed your desk on how the hell we rid our planet of plastic? Like, how do we phase it out? How do we because it seems like such a big market opportunity for competitors to plastic to come in and say, here's all this biodegradable fertilize your garden alternatives to plastic that are just as durable and reliable. Have you seen anything like that coming on the horizon? Any potential?
Definitely. We have, in fact, the mayor recently signed an executive order that we are banning the city's purchase of unnecessary single-use plastic foodware. And so where we were spending money, whether it's in the schools or in our corrections facilities or in hospitals, all this extra plastic, forks and sporks and knives and plates and cups and things, we are going to be working with those agencies. They're developing a plan to shift to compostable alternatives. We are going to be ending our use of those plastics for city use. And then we're going to be working with the city council to introduce legislation to make that all across the city, just like we've done with styrofoam. We've gotten there with bans on plastic bags. And we're going to be looking at foodware next.
So New York City's had a great burst of entrepreneurship, and there's been all these campuses and things and workspaces. Can't you have the mayor do a contest of, I want someone in the city, and we'll do tax incentives that Amazon could only dream of. If you can just create a plastic killer, we'll give you whatever entrepreneurship resources you need. Can't you guys do like a plastic killer competition for entrepreneurs?
I love it. We have a program called NYCX where we go out for looking for new technology solutions, and we've run some on electric vehicle charging solutions, and we've had some really good success doing that. And the city's had really great success doing competitions like that. And if we can figure out how to do the plastic killer one, we'll give you credit.
Thank you. I don't want the credit. I just want to kill plastic. Anyway, so the Green New Deal. New York City just signed on with the Green New Deal. We're hearing so much about that. That's like the big buzzword, and there's this whole nationwide grassroots campaign springing up around that. Could you walk us through what is the Green New Deal?
The Green New Deal at the national level, of course, is the resolution that was introduced, thinking about how we can bring our national ambitions in line with the scientific realities and at the same time, think about a just transition and make sure that we are getting to this place in a way that creates jobs and deals with the social equity challenges that we have in our society. The Green New Deal for us here in New York City is in many ways already underway. And with the work that we are doing through our 1NYC program, which is a city strategic plan, we've really brought forward as New York City's Green New Deal. We're working to confront our climate crisis, to achieve equity and strengthen our democracy. And it's a comprehensive approach. It's anchored in things like the building retrofit mandates, which is going to dramatically cut the greenhouse gas emissions from our building sector, which is our biggest source of greenhouse gases here in New York City. We're looking that we know it's going to create at least 25,000 jobs by 2030. So it's dealing both with the need to cut greenhouse gas emissions, to create jobs, and to pull that package together in a smart way. But we're doing other things as well, and the work that we're going to be doing to continue to upgrade the standards and to ban the glass buildings that are energy inefficient in New York City, the expanded mandatory organics composting, and then all the things we're doing to prepare for the risks of climate change and the flood protections and the heat mitigation, the work that we're doing to make sure that how we get there matters. And that's why our Green New Deal includes things like the city's commitment to guaranteed healthcare for New Yorkers. It's why we talk about the need for equity and excellence in our education system and in our schools. And it really is a comprehensive approach that we're putting forward and we're already moving on here in New York City.
In terms of buildings, I know that part of what you just passed was the retrofitting of buildings, and it's now The onus, I believe, is now on whoever manages the building, the condo boards and so forth, to make sure that they have energy efficiency, they have the right windows and all of that. And obviously those solutions for like a city like New York City can be transferred to any city anywhere. Could you walk us through what we now need to do and what people anywhere, wherever they live, should be doing to their buildings?
Yeah, sure. And so our retrofit mandates applies to buildings over 25,000 square feet. So some of the largest buildings, which end up being some of our largest polluters in New York City. And we've set hard targets that they need to meet by 2024 and by 2030 so that they need to continue to invest to drive down their energy use. And that's going to be things like facades. It's going to be things like electrical system upgrades. It's going to be the boilers and heating and hot water system and all those sort of technologies that all exist. But we need to accelerate their adoption and continue to move them forward. At the same time, we've passed legislation that opens up low-cost financing, something called PACE financing, to allow people to take advantage of the financing offered to make those investments. And it's a complete package that really sets hard targets for the greenhouse gas emissions and puts us on track to delivering on the Paris Agreement.
Do you offer residents any sort of toolkit or any sort of guide, video series, anything saying, here are the steps to make these changes in your own power, like for your building where you live, for your own apartment unit? Do you have anything like that?
We have a really good co-op and condo retrofit guide, and I'm happy to share that with you, and we can share it to all your listeners. But it is the sort of step-by-step things that you can do on your own building. And then, the Green YC program is also then thinking about what you can do in your own unit. Because if you rent an apartment unit, obviously you don't have control over the base building systems, but you can weatherize your apartment and use less energy in the winter, and you can do things like that. Lots of different tips on using less energy, and we have those resources out there for New Yorkers.
What if we did like greenest building in all of New York City challenge, neighborhood by neighborhood, precinct by precinct, and made it like a big competition?
We have a program called a Carbon Challenge, and some of the biggest institutions, and we just celebrated, I believe it's 10th anniversary last year, where some of the biggest institutions in the city, and the universities and hospitals, and some of the affordable housing buildings have been basically making voluntary commitments and challenging themselves to meet those targets for greenhouse gas emissions. And it's like we need lots of different approaches if we're going to get there. And the voluntary approach works. And in some cases, like we've done with the mandates, we've had to set the hard caps for certain buildings. And so we're going to be continuing to do that and finding lots of different tools in which we can help owners make these investments.
And obviously, we've seen a huge shift, generational shift, with Greta Thunberg coming in and giving an empowering speech to European leaders. And then you saw this wave of Green Party candidates being voted in to European Parliament. And they're saying it's like the Greta effect, that the children are saying, look, we don't want to inherit this toxic planet. Wake up, everyone. Are you seeing that here in New York City, the Greta effect coming into our city?
Well, I'm definitely seeing and incredibly heartened by the youth leadership on climate all over the world, and yeah, Greta's doing amazing things. The 0 Hour folks, the climate strikers here in the U.S. and around the world. I mean, it's all so very impressive, and maybe not that surprising that those who have the most to lose from all the changes that we're going to see in our climate and the crisis that we've caused are going to be the most vocal about it, and their coming of age is going to be defined by what happens in our atmosphere and what happens in our climate. And so there's an intergenerational moment that's coming in our politics that I think is going to be defined by this. And I'm not sure how soon that's going to come and whether it's as quick as it just happened in Europe or it takes a little longer. I think it's coming, and I think we need to find ways to support it and make sure that we can all, look ourselves in the mirror and look our kids in the mirror and say, we've done everything we can. I think it's so important to be able to do that.
In terms of the monster hitting us, the monster of the climate crisis, it's going to create climate refugees. We're already seeing that in California. And obviously the train has left the station, and now we're kind of bracing for impact and trying to prevent any further worsening of the crisis. But are we prepared here in New York City for climate refugees? When do you see it? Well, I mean, that's Hurricane Sandy, right? That displaced a lot of people, certainly. But is that part of what you and your organizations that you're linked with address, is the potential of a refugee crisis?
It's clearly coming. The World Bank has estimated that something like 143 million refugees could be created by climate change in just 3 regions of the world by 2050. It's a staggering statistic to think about that many people on the move and Are any of us prepared for that? I mean, we saw clearly the impacts of migrant crisis from Syria and other parts of the Middle East, and the impacts in Europe, and how ill-prepared we all are for those sort of impacts. This is going to dwarf that. And so better first to get at the root cause of the problem and cut our greenhouse gas emissions and do the things we need to do to head off the most catastrophic effects. But we're going to see impacts. And so we do need to have a better programs in place for dealing with migrants. And quite honestly, I don't think most folks around the globe have really wrapped their heads around that yet, but we know it's coming.
Oh my gosh. So let me just brace myself. Okay, so obviously that's a really urgent talking point for Europeans, because the refugee crisis that they're on the front lines of today with trying to like find homes and bring in all these refugees from Northern Africa and the Middle East, like that's obviously been a huge issue in Europe for several years now. So it's almost like Europe, if you think this is bad now, think about the climate refugees that are coming. And so it's just, the urgency is there. The economic impact is there. And it's sort of, there's simply no excuse anymore, even for people who are greedy and think first and foremost about their bottom line, and they're, think first and foremost financially. It's there across the board. There's every single argument's been addressed.
That's right, and being rich won't help you in this case. And so if you think that you're like, well, it's not going to impact wealthy areas, or it's that's not true. And the clear need to find intergenerational equity as we think about what we're doing to our climate is just so important, because we are leaving the next generation a mess, and we need to be doing everything we can to forestall that, to minimize it, and ultimately to find ways to reverse it.
There's simply nowhere to hide from this. I mean, even creating space pods to blast yourself off the planet. I mean, have you seen astronaut Kelly when he came back? His body was completely like broken down for weeks. It's sort of like space isn't going to save you here. It's more hostile than this planet you're abandoning. So yeah, rich people, you're stuck with us in this world that we're all creating. So after digesting all of this, what advice do you have for somebody listening who's probably like curled up in a ball and just thinking, wow, my future, my kid's future? What advice do you have for that person? That's basically me at night in the wee hours. Like, this stuff keeps me up at night.
The one simple word I would put at this is vote. It matters who's in office, and make sure that your elected leaders understand that this is a challenge, this is a crisis that we're facing, and act with the urgency that it demands. The science is clear. We know what the solutions look like. We need the will to bring our actions up in line with the scale that is required.
Great. Well, this is so wonderful. And so again, give us some websites, Twitter accounts, anything. Where should people go now after listening to all this?
Yeah, so check out our website, nyc.gov/1NYC. And that's all one word, ONENYC. And check us out on Twitter at NYClimate.
Great. And if you're not a New York City resident, obviously you can talk to your own city officials, no matter how big or small they are, and say, hey, look at all these solutions. We can make buildings greener and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone everywhere can make their voice heard on this. And this is a crisis that's going to hit everywhere. So
thank you so much for the work you're doing. I will leave you now to continue making the world a safer place for us, and Godspeed with all of that.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah KENDZIOR and ANDREA CHALUPA. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our editors are Carlin Daigle and Nicholas Torres. This episode was edited by Nicholas Torres.
Original music in Gaslit Nation was produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damien Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon: Solomon Hikes, Alan Liu, David Porter, Joel Newman, Paige Harrington, Adam Levine, Alexandria Lane Detweiler, Glenda de Guzman, Henri Duchamp, Jared Lombardo, Jody DeWitt, John Ripley, Kate Cotton, Kelly Ranson, Kevin M. Garnett, Lorraine W. Todd, Tanya Chalupa, Terry Brady, Zachary Lemon, Ann Marshall, Michael Bayland, Brian Tahudin, Carolyn Friend, Catherine Anderson Carina, Kathy Kavanaugh, Diana Gallagher, D.L. Singfield, Doug Friedenberg, Eric Kaplan, Irina Guardia, Ethan Mann, George Hughes, Gordon Shumway, Gustav Halsby, James Tolley, Jason Rita, Jennifer Slavic, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, John Dambro, John Keene, Kenshiro Nakagawa, Kevin Christie, Kim Mellon, Christy Vital, Larry Colwell, Lawrence Graham, Luke Stranad, Margaret Moe, Matt Perez, Matthew Copeland, Maureen Murphy, Michelle Dash, Mike Tripico, Nicole Spear, Rhonda White, Rich Craw, Sonia Bogdanovic, Ted Gary Mitchell, Thomas Burns, Victoria Olson, Zap Rousdower, and Hollis Ramsey. Thank you all for your support. We could not make this show without you. To deal with these abnormal times that we find ourselves in, we here at Gaslit Nation take a strong stance of saying no to savior syndrome. The only thing that's going to get us out of this is self-reliance and holding our leaders accountable. And the only power we have left that we can rely on is grassroots power. To illustrate our point, here's Share, providing a useful metaphor for these times. Rely on no one but your own hard work and dedication. That's the only way out of this. Awaken your inner Share.
You said a man is not a necessity, a man is a luxury.
Like dessert. Yeah. A man is absolutely not a necessity.
Did you mean that to sound mean and bitter?
Oh, not at all. I adore dessert. I love men. I think men are the coolest. But you don't really need them to live. My mom said to me, you know, sweetheart, one day you should settle down and marry a rich man. And I said, Mom, I am a rich man.
Welcome to the Gaslit Nation Action Guide, available on our website, gaslitnationpod.com. Democracy is a lifestyle. Trump is a symptom of the corruption, institutional failure, and indifference that we can no longer tolerate.
Okay, so number one, get a guide. Stride Toward Freedom, The Montgomery Story by Martin Luther King Jr. is an essential guide to self-management, managing others, and building teams. This inspirational case study of resistance, written by a young MLK after successfully leading the Montgomery bus boycott, shows how smart organization took on the authoritarianism of the Jim Crow South. Never forget that MLK was considered a radical in his day, even though there's nothing radical about demanding human rights and dignity. Today, the same remains true. It's not radical or socialist to demand that corporations stop polluting for profits and to call for an end to tax breaks, like for sending jobs overseas, that worsen the income inequality crisis. To help communicate these urgent issues, another essential guide is the all-new Don't Think of an Elephant, Know Your Values, and Frame the Debate by George Lakoff.
Number 2 of the Gaslit Nation Action Guide, focus on state races. States decide key quality of life issues, and local candidates help drive votes up ballot for federal races. Every District and Future Now are two excellent groups working to build a progressive infrastructure and turn states blue from the bottom up. Get involved by donating what you can, or join or start your own group with their help in your state. We provide on our Action Guide interviews with Every District and Future Now. For more background.
Number 3, join. Grassroots power is one of the strongest forms of power we have left in America, especially with Mitch McConnell and Trump packing the courts. Don't succumb to savior syndrome by expecting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or whomever else you admire to do all the work. Representatives are human and need our help. Fulfill the far-right's worst nightmare by creating generations of AOCs by helping build a more progressive union. Join a local group from any of these great national organizations for important action alerts like demonstrations or getting out the vote. Indivisible, Swing Left, Sister District, Move On, Flippable.
Number 4, fight global warming. Sunrise Movement is a grassroots organization demanding a Green New Deal. There are a lot of other groups working to adopt urgently needed green initiatives. C40 Cities connects cities around the world committed to taking climate action. 350.org helps activists rise to the challenge of the climate crisis. And there are more trusted organizations that need our support, linked to on our Action Guide.
Number 5, unionize. In the age of Trump, there should be no more fear of starting or joining a union. Just tell your boss that you saw how unions protected workers during the universally unpopular Trump shutdown. Fight for 15 and its local variants are working to ensure a fair wage and strengthen unions in the service sector. Don't know how to get started? Read Organizing to Win, New Research on Union Strategies, and No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age, both of which are linked to on the Gaslit Nation website.
Number 6, run for something. There are a lot of great groups out there that demystify the process of becoming a candidate and running a campaign. Run for Something is one of our favorites. There's even a book to help you get started. Run for Something, a real talk guide to fixing the system yourself by Amanda Littman. If you believe in facts and science and are a compassionate human being, you need to run for something and recruit others to as well. Even if it's a long shot, you can still create urgent conversations and treat your campaign like a platform for discussions you care about, helping bring together like-minded people to work for change even long past the election. Just look at what a refreshing discovery Longshot Mayor Pete has been and all the great work Andrew Gillum continues to do to register 1 million voters in Florida.
Number 7, protect the vote. Every District Action Fund just launched a, quote, report card identifying states with enough progressive support in local governments to push through important voting reforms like automatic registration and the abolishment of racist voter ID laws. Is your state on the list? You can click a link and find out. If so, every District Action Fund empowers you to help your state reach the gold standard of voting. Concerned about vote hacking and Ivanka Trump branded voting machines? Yes, that is a thing. Secure Our Vote provides background information and other resources to take action. Other groups to check out are Spread the Vote, Let America Vote, and Project ID, which help people get the information they need to register, vote, and get an ID. And again, these are linked to on our site.
Number 8. Launch ballot initiatives and laws. Why not launch a ballot initiative? Kate Fahey turned her Facebook post into the movement Voters Not Politicians to end gerrymandering in Michigan. It passed overwhelmingly. We have a link on our action guide for you to read more of her story. Or you could build a grassroots coalition to get a law passed in your state. In our episode, How to Pass a Law, I interview my mother about how she, while pregnant with me and a young mother already, without any political experience, mobilized a grassroots army to pass the child car seat law in California. Yes, it can be done.
Number 9, end terrorism in America. Moms Demand works to elect candidates and lobby for sensible legislation to stop the gun violence epidemic driven by the blood money gun lobby, the NRA. Southern Poverty Law Center exposes white supremacy, a leading terrorist movement in America. To help immigrant communities deliberately terrorized by Trump's cruel border policies, we have a list linked here of groups that you can support.
Number 10, make art. To say that art cannot make a difference stems from a tone-deaf attitude of privilege. Ukraine's Euromaidan revolution of 2013 to 2014 relied on art and artists of all kinds to sustain protesters living in Arctic cold temperatures and under the threat of government-sanctioned violence. North Korean dissident Yeonmi Park said that Orwell's Animal Farm helped her heal after escaping the cult-like dictatorship. And in our episode, The Blue Wave Continues, Kansas Rising, we share Davis Hammett's account of how painting a rainbow house created a ripple effect in Kansas, leading to major electoral victories. We need the artists and storytellers of all kinds more than ever.
So this is not a comprehensive list of suggestions on how you can create a more progressive America and stop entrenched corruption. There are many paths you can take, and we encourage you to think for yourself and to work together. There is no one solution. Whether you're in a blue state or a red state, these ideas apply to you. Do not take any of the freedoms you have left for granted. Never underestimate the power of hard work. Additionally, we have a reading list linked to from there because it's essential to read widely to understand how we got here and the best ways to navigate the challenges of the 21st century. So again, all of this is available on our site, gaslitnationpod.com.